それでは皆様、お待たせいたしました。ここからはセッション6、利他が生み出す新たな資本主義と平和への道筋をテーマに進めてまいります。ご登壇される皆様をご紹介いたします。モデレーターとしてライター小原和弘さん、そしてパネラーとしてポジティブプラネット会長ジャックあたりさん、バーモント大学グロスマンビジネススクール教授スチュアート・エルハートさん、国際 NGO パックス核軍縮プログラムマネージャースージー・スナイダーさん、以上4名の皆さんで進めていただきます。それでは小原さん、よろしくお願いいたします。
はい、皆さんおはようございます。昨日も深夜2時3時まで平和についての熱い会話がすごく続いたっていうふうに聞いてます。で、今日は今回10以上のセッションの最後として、あったりさん、スチュアート・ハートさん、スナイダーさんを迎えて、利他を生み出す新たな資本主義と平和の道筋っていうことを語っていきたいと思うんですけども、最初にまずあたりさんが基調講演でですね、統計的に見ればジェネラルに見れば戦争とか暴力とかは減っていて、飢餓も減っていて、ただ新しい危険暴力というものが見えてきているということをクリアに示してくださいました。最初にまずあたりさんにお伺いしたいのは、じゃあこの不安アングザイティに対してどういうホープ、望みがあるのか、どういうヒントがあるのかっていうところからぜひ話をさせていただければ。
Well, I am always afraid when we speak of in terms of hope and anxiety, because very often people are looking for hope, and when they have hope, they don't act. They think that it's enough to have hope, and that they can wait for others to find a solution. A problem in which you wait for the solution coming from someone else is always leading to a catastrophe. If you wait for someone else to answer to your problem, you get a catastrophe. Then, to have hope, if it means that I have hope in the fact that someone else will find a solution for me, it's a disaster. If hope means that I look at the problems and I think that there is a way for me, myself, to participate in finding a solution, that's good. If hope means that I have a reason to believe that someone else will find a solution, it's a disaster. Then we may have hope because we cannot say that the problems are unmanageable. From time to time, and you were right to raise this question, in some period of time, there was moments where people say, no hope, no way. There is even a very famous European novelist and essayist and writer called Stefan Zweig, who in 1943 committed suicide because he believed that Germany will win the war and that the world will be for 50 years under German rule. And he committed suicide in 1943, which is at a moment where any lucid observer will have seen that there is hope and that the war could be won by Americans and French and British, and hope was possible if we fight. And commit suicide at a very bad and irrational moment. We are in a moment where I know a lot of people who think that there is no hope. And I know a lot of people who say there is a hope, something else. The most important hope, which is an illusion, is technological progress. For instance, for climate change, a lot of people say, well, we don't have to take care of it. Technology will find a solution. Always technology finds a solution. And it's true that very often technology finds a solution. In my view, hope it's true that technology can be a solution, but it's true also that technology can be a problem and will be a problem. For instance, AI will be a problem, nanotechnology will be a problem, biotechnology will be a problem. There are problems and solutions in technology, which means that the real hope is in human behavior. If I have a hope today, is the fact that many people, a growing number of people, begin to realize that short-termism is a suicide, and that we should think in terms of altruistic dimension. Global market economy or global capitalism is based on selfishness. I act for myself. And the doctrine, the ideology is supposed to say is each one is acting rationally for his own selfish interest, the world is in good solution. That's the ideology of market economy, and that's the global ideology. If each one is rationally selfish, the world is in good shape. A lot of people begin to realize that it's not true. That for the world to be in good shape is for people not to be selfish but to be altruistic, to think of long-term interests, selfish. And that means that to be rationally selfish is to be altruistic. It is in my selfish interest to be altruistic. Many people begin to realize that. Many people begin to realize that the best way to deal with my survival is to take care of the interest of the others. And that's my most important hope. I see that in NGOs, I see that in the behavior of next generations, I see that beginning of behavior of new companies is what we call positive behavior, taking care of next generations.
まさにこの2日間というのはその短期的なものがもたらしている弊害っていうことを皆さんで語り合ってその利他に向き合うっていうことをやってきた2日間だと思うんですけども、プロフ・スチュアートじゃあ、今回セッションをずっと体験されてきて、じゃあその長期的な利他の行動に向かうためにどういう構造が必要で、どういうことを我々は始めなければいけないかっていうことに関してぜひヒントがあれば。
Well, I think really building on Jacques' comments that it's increasingly in companies' self-interest to behave altruistically. I mean, I think that's becoming increasingly clear, right? That we were speaking a little bit of ahead of the session, and the idea that many of the problems that we face are global in scope, but yet governments have not been able to, they've not had the wherewithal to really come together at a global scale to address them, be they climate change, be they loss of biodiversity, be the issue inequality, which has both a local, national, as well as a global component to it. And that in a somewhat deliciously paradoxical way, the only truly global institutions are corporations, right, and NGOs, as was pointed out during our discussion. And that in an interesting, again, sort of paradoxical way, we see, at least in some cases, those very corporations and NGOs leading the charge, toward the future rather than just looking to protect the past. So I think, so one of the, it is hopeful at some level, but I think I totally agree. We don't sit by passively. You have to be a player in the game. It's really about a transformation of the way that business actually gets done, right? I mean, it's a business looks different, I think, 10, 20 years from now, even 5 years from now, than it has over the last 20 years. And we begin to see that borne out with evidence, right? That those companies that actually have developed the kind of capacity, the vision, the purpose, which I think is another crucial element, right? That increasingly to attract younger employees, companies have to have some sense of social purpose, or else younger people just don't want to work for them. And that's especially true of global companies. And that as you look forward, we've got some evidence that suggests that those companies that develop both the aspiration but also the ability to deliver on a social value proposition, right? Kind of value that improves the lives of various stakeholders, including the investors, right? Actually outperform financially from those that focus narrowly on profit maximization or shareholder value as the exclusive metric of success. We've got growing evidence that that's the case. I think as that evidence builds, then it becomes increasingly clear that the only way to get to the future in business is to deliver on the promise of social purpose.
Yeah. 今おっしゃったやっぱりグローバルに本当にコントリビューションできるのは、今は企業とNGO、NPO でその中で企業っていうものがやっぱりパーパスドリブン、目的駆動型で本当に良い目的を抱えたところに良い社員が集まってくる。でそれはすごく感じていて、実は僕自身は、今バリ島とシンガポールに住みながらいろんな会社のお手伝いをさせていただいていて、で実際その前は Google で働いていたんですけれども、やっぱり Google っていうのに働く人たちっていうのは、ある種どこでも働ける人たちで、だからこそやっぱりパーパス、目的が美しいところに人が集まる。でつい昨日のディナーでも話してましたけど、今やっぱり Google すら本当に美しい目的で動いてるのかっていう議論の中で、ちゃんと社員たちが自ら自分たちを補正するような動きってことも起こっていて、じゃあこういったパーパスドリブンな企業っていうものが本当に適切に動いていく中で、ミズ・スナイダーにお聞きしたいのは、じゃあ今度は企業とNPO、NGO の関係ですね。特にパックスさんは企業のアクティビティとして核だったりクラスターボムだったりっていうものの投資を抑制するような活動を通して企業と NPO の新しい関係っていうのを見出されていこうとされてますけれども、この目的ドリブンっていうのに向かっていく中でNPO、NGO が貢献するやり方、ないしはそれを受けて企業がどう変わっていけるのかっていうことについてぜひお話しいただければ。
Thank you very much. It's very interesting because governments don't move as quickly, right? And the market does move a lot faster. And we've found, especially now working on engagement with the financial sector, in terms of the investment in the production of nuclear weapons, that since last year's adoption of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, 10% of the identified investors have dropped out. They said, oh, this is a bomb that's been recognized by most of the world as completely illegitimate. We don't want to have anything to do with it. And that's 10%. That's quite significant. It didn't represent a huge portion of capital, but it did represent what we're hoping will be a trend. We've seen that with our work on cluster munitions, the norm matters. And that norm has been established. The norm that this is an illegitimate weapon is gone beyond what governments have signed up to. And even companies producing the bombs in countries that have not signed up to the treaty, those companies are coming back to those governments and saying, no, we're sorry. We won't make these anymore. The norm is too great. And so my work is primarily building up this stigma, building up this feeling of this norm, this feeling that it is possible to change. And I think that's also really important. It's not hope so much as it is confidence. We know that we can set up a better course. And we can also kind of feed into the most selfish pursuit, which is peace. In a way, it really is. Because I know for myself, it certainly makes my life better to live in a peaceful world, right? And it's something that I think we're looking at engaging directly with the financial sector. We want to see banks, pension funds adopt very clear policies that they will not invest, they will not seek a profit from the production of a weapon that is deemed by the world to be completely illegitimate. And it's a very interesting line of work. With some of our work, our organization is connected with this move towards the development of lethal autonomous weapons systems. And so we're working with the business community to build up a pledge leading, we hope, towards a code of conduct that AI developers will not willfully engage in the production of weapons that without human control make the choice of life over death. And so it's an interesting place to be. It's a lot of fun too.
昨日のコトラーさんの話の中でも、結局企業が平和の時に一番儲けて、で戦争の時に一番損をするんだから、ある意味スナイダーさんが言うように、企業にとって平和っていうのはセルフィッシュに求める行為かもしれないっていうのはすごく面白い観点ですけれども、ただ一方でアタリさんさっき言ったように働く人たちがやっぱりパーパスによって集まってくるようになってきた。で投資家っていう人たちも戦争に対するアクティビティに関わる人たちを NPO、NGO たちのオーディットの下で投資家たちがきちんとそういったものに関わらない企業に対して投資をしないようになってきている、こういうアクティビティの中にもう一度とはいえじゃあ政府であったり国際機関っていうのが、どういう関わりを持つべきなのか、先ほど規範っていう話もありましたけれども、どうやって新しい規範を作っていくべきなのか。
Yeah, this is a key point, because what we do with NGOs, what we do with universities, what we do like scholars when we write or think will not be enough. It is clear that challenging the negative economy, which is the economy working for short-termism, is fundamental. It has to begin by ideology, by doctrine, by thinking. It has to move through advocacy, through NGO acting, and what you do on this specific sector is important. I also said yesterday the importance of drones and AI as new weapons, and I share with you. And I do think that we can influence through reorientation of financial big players, such as the sovereign funds or the largest private funds, which is some of them are moving. BlackRock is moving, Blackstone is moving. Some of them are moving in the direction of putting positive economy as a criteria for their investment. They are moving. But it's true that it's not going to be enough, and we have to move from positive, voluntarily accepted, facultative acceptance to a compulsory one. And that move is very difficult to do. I think it's going to come through, not through a global rule of law accepted by an international treaty or by a global conqueror. There are many ways of it to happen. One of it could be the extraterritoriality of one country laws, the US. Let's make a dream. Suppose that US presidents on the long term have a positive behavior, and that they decide that whatever they want to be in their own country is also implemented through extraterritoriality to others on positive criteria. Not by saying that you should have an embargo on a specific country, but for instance, if the Americans would say, everyone which is not positive in their investment cannot have business in the US. That could be a way to have global norms, because the US are still a dominating nation, not maybe forever, but for the moment. I'm not a dreamer, even if I like to be a dreamer, but I'm not a dreamer, and I don't see any circumstances in which American presidents and majority in the parliament will say, we will create extraterritoriality on negative actions. That is a dream. The only other dream we may have is to see the coalition of governments, of companies and NGOs embarking into the creation of international norms that will after that be implemented globally simply because they are agreed by companies. We have seen that in the past. In the Middle Ages, there was agreement between companies out of governments. They create corporations, which was a way to organize business. They create specific norms for the members of the union, and after a moment, these norms created for the members of the union were generalized by governments. We begin to see that in some sectors. We have seen that in accounting, we have seen that in banking, even if in banking there are two specific different kind of regulations. We see that in advertising. There's something which is allowed and something which is not, which has been agreed by the professions. And we may see that and hope that this will be first agreed by the professionals and then generalized by international institutions. That's the two different avenues I see.
Could I build on that? Because I think that's a really important point that, again, somewhat counterintuitively, I think what we see happening in the private sector, again, it's a minority of companies that are taking this stance, but I think they're proving to be the most effective in many ways, which is to say they're extending their action beyond just their own, I won't even call it their narrow self-interest, just their own value chain, right? I think if you think about how the idea of sustainability has evolved, it started with, compliance with regulation, 30, 40 years ago, kind of evolved to, well, we could actually prevent waste and prevent emissions, kind of eco-efficiency, and that's going to save us money because we operate more efficiently, and that's all, great. And then kind of extended to this idea that, well, we need to think more than just about our own operations. What about upstream, our supply chain? We could, kind of put some pressure on the suppliers, kind of how do we green up or make our supply chain more sustainable? And then downstream, how do we think about our product and use? What are its impacts? What happens when the product reaches its end of its useful life? Do we design it to be taken back? Do we think in terms of circular economy? All that kind of, and I think most companies are not there yet, even on that dimension, right? But I think the companies that are most out in front of this have extended beyond even that, right? And so Dow, of all companies, I think has come up with a good lexicon for thinking about this. So the first type of sustainability they call footprint, right, which is probably familiar to everyone. It's kind of your corporate operational footprint, and how do we, kind of minimize or zero that out in terms of impact. Second one, you can think of as being your handprint, right? Sort of the company reaches upstream and the company reaches downstream. So how do we think more sustainably about the corporate handprint? And that is pretty much what most companies would draw the limit at traditionally. But yet we begin to see now a small number of companies that realize that just operating through their own agency, through their own product systems, isn't going to deliver the results in the world that are going to be necessary to get to a sustainable and peaceful and prosperous world. So they have now taken on, I suppose you would say, the responsibility, but I think it's also enlightened self-interest, to build collaborative platforms, so we think in terms of public-private partnerships, but it's really thinking in terms of building platforms with other players, with NGOs, with governments where appropriate, with other companies, to drive change at a more ecosystemic or public policy level. Dow calls this blueprint, right? Having a blueprint strategy, and if you think about it, that's a form of positive lobbying, right? That lobbying in the past was kind of a dirty word because it meant that you just try to protect your existing position. Increasingly, I think we're seeing companies kind of look out to the future and see that if all they do is try to change their own behavior, it's not enough because governments haven't gotten ahead of this issue enough to pull them forward. So they have to actually take the initiative to build the coalition of players that can pull government to the future. So I find that a very, very interesting development.
今おっしゃったように、まだ少数の企業かもしれないけれども、その長期的な視点を持ちながらその連携を広げていくっていうものが、広がっていて、で実際昨日素晴らしかったのは、その夜のアートのセッションの中でその関根さんが、じゃあそういうそのマイノリティかもしれないけれども、そのちゃんと考えてるアクティビティだったり、ないしはその企業が短期間で考えて動いてしまっていることの弊害みたいなものがアートの力とか、ムービー映画の力だったりして、その他の人を揺り動かす、みたいなことも動いているっていう話があって、その今言ったその小さな企業のいい活動っていうものをこうどう広げていくことがその一番レバレッジが効くのか、どうすれば、その加速させることができるのかっていうのをぜひまたにさん。
One element of answer could be to create debates on objective facts. If you cannot measure a goal, it's very difficult to debate. We have tried in our foundation to measure what we call positivity, what it means to think about the interest of next generations. And in order to participate to the global debate, we have created indicators, a measurement of what is to be positive for a nation, for a territory, and for a company. And we have created indexes of that. And we begin to measure it, and we are beginning to create debates. Let's take examples. We have created an index, and we measure since 6 years now the positivity, which means the interest for next generations, the altruism of countries. We do that for all members of OECD. And we have a ranking of what is the most positive nation, what is the nation which is more altruistic, not government, nations. And for that we make a cocktail of more than 40 indexes. And that gives a very interesting ranking. I must say that among the 40 countries that we rank, year after year, the Scandinavian countries and New Zealand appears to be the best. US is in the middle, France is in the low middle, Japan is very bad in terms of long-term thinking, altruism, because of many reasons, not difficult to think. And we do hope that such a debate can push nations to change their governance, their policy, their strategy in saying, well, I want to have a better ranking. As we have a debate on, we want to have global growth. We do the same for territories, and we begin to measure the positivity of territories, and we begin to do the same for companies. We have to do it with figures that are public, because it's difficult to do that for non-public figures, which means that we have to have agreement of companies, and very often they are shy. They don't want to demonstrate if they are positive or not. But we do hope it is important, even for financial institutions, that will give them a criteria. I should invest in companies which have a good quantified measure of positivity. I don't know if our indicators are the best. They are the advantage of existing, and they could be debated as and improved. But I do think that quantifying what means to be altruistic, what means to be positive, is fundamental, as it was fundamental to quantify growth in order to get a debate on more growth, less growth, etc., etc.
多分
Sorry, just to follow up on that, when you ask this question, how do we expand this? It's quantifying what is moved towards positivity is a great way to do that, and also showing how it works, how it feeds that kind of already internalized sense of success, how it builds towards a profit motive. I was thinking the last session, peace in sports, there's competitiveness in sports, and there's competitiveness in business. And when you show a competitive advantage by ranking higher on these indices, well, that's a great incentive for others to join in. So just to add to what you said.
It's really true, right? So one other comment, that this idea of being purpose-driven, just sort of having a platitude about what the company stands for isn't enough, right? I mean, I think it's easy to kind of spout a platitude about our purpose is, it's a little bit like mission and vision, like people used to carry laminated cards with our mission is, and then no one could remember them without looking at the card, right? So I think the crucial aspect of a truly purpose-driven company drives it throughout the entire organization, right? And one of the things we found kind of looking, we've had the occasion to create or draw a purposive sample of companies in the world that by various measures, kind of coming back to the idea of metrics, are at the tip of the spear, that are really sort of driving this process forward. And one of the things we find that's interesting is that the best companies, the ones that are sort of on the leading edge, take this notion of purpose and then double click on it, right, in a very significant way. And that, in the past you'd have sort of a broad mission, and then there would be a bunch of goals and metrics, right, that the companies would come up with them. Most of them operational, financial, they might have to do with water and energy use and so forth, eco-efficiency metrics. But there would be almost no connection between their broad statement of mission or purpose and the goals and metrics that they had in place. What's beginning to emerge now is kind of another tier that there's a purpose, but then under the purpose are some very concrete, what we think of as aspirations and quests. Like, what is it specifically that these companies are out to change in the world? And they're very clear about articulating what those are. For example, right, a company that gets a lot of press, but I think they deserve it, Unilever, right, which broadly has a sustainable living plan, as their corporate purpose. But then they go on to articulate very clearly three what we would think of as aspirations or quests. One is improving health and well-being for an additional 1 billion people. The other is reducing footprint by half. And so they've articulated these, and then under those, specific goals for those, like 2 or 3 goals, with metrics that you can measure. So you can actually track progress toward this. And then connecting those up to the strategy agenda, to the technology and product development agenda, so that the purpose, the aspirations and quests, the goals and the metrics are tied to rewards and incentives, and it's going to drive innovation within the company in that direction. And increasingly, that's what we're finding. The best companies have that quality. An Interface, which many people may not know, commercial carpet company, has long been kind of a visionary, had a visionary leader starting a guy named Ray Anderson, like 30 years back. That was mostly at the time about, kind of the idea of getting to zero, having zero net impact when it comes to operations, which is great, but that isn't going to cut it for the future, right? So Ray passed away maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and they've now they've kind of declared victory on that one because essentially they're there, when it comes to operations. And they've now, within the company, through this sort of internal process, come up with their next aspiration, really their purpose. And their stated purpose, which is truly audacious, I think, is climate take-back, right? The purpose of Interface carpet, they make commercial carpet, is to reclaim a climate, a living climate, that is climate take-back. And this is their corporate purpose, right? And under that are a whole series of aspirations and quests that they articulate, like love carbon, which means how do we sequester carbon in our products rather than emitting carbon to the atmosphere. We can, through our own, we can sequester carbon in our products and thereby suck carbon out of the atmosphere. So they have a whole series of very specific things like this, which gives, sort of clarity and guidance to people in the company of what does this mean from the standpoint of innovation, technology development, strategy, and so forth, and is really attractive, like a commercial carpet company in Atlanta, Georgia. How are they going to attract the best people? Well, this kind of purpose, mission, aspiration, it does, right? There are people clamoring to work for this company now. So I think that this sort of more integrated, sort of systematic, audacious model for the future is where the leading edge companies are.
具体的に いいパーパスを持っているポジティブな会社っていうものがすごく可視化がしやすくなっていて、でそこに人が動いていて、で今おっしゃられたようなそのポジティブなインデックスっていうものができることで、多分さっきのあたりさんのですねポジティブの国のランキングで日本が低かったって話を聞いた瞬間のやっぱり皆さんっていうのが多分一番自分ごと化されたと思うんですよね。でやっぱりこのインデックス化されること、スコア化されることで、どう自分ごと化していくかっていうことってすごく大事だと思うんですけど、先ほど話したように140ですか、インデックスで、この考えてみると、じゃあこのポジティブインデックスの前のインデックスは何だかっていうと、GDP が測っていて、でじゃあ企業同士が測るスコアが何だかっていうと、それは株式市場がやっていて、じゃあこういうGDP にポジティブインデックスが変わっていくとすると、何が一番大事になってくるのか、その時企業にそれを添付させる時に新しい株式市場なのか、新しい資本主義なのか、インデックスを生かすためのシステムっていうのはどういうふうに導いていけばいいんでしょうか。
What kind of system? What do you mean by system?
So I talk about the system as the GDP indexing, or the stock markets, or
Well, this index will still exist. The question is, who is the most important? I think an index of positivity should be more important than the GDP, but it's far from being the case. It exists, but it's not well known. In some countries it is well known and debated. It is, for instance, in Italy, the index of positivity is expected with anxiety each year, and it is a front line in the newspapers when we publish it, and there are a lot of debate about it. It's also the case in Scandinavian countries, where Scandinavian countries are fighting who is going to be the first this year among us. That exists, but it's not worldwide known. And I think what is important is to have that more a question of debate. We publish this index on a yearly basis in September, and this should be each year in September a huge national debate. I would be happy if in Japan people begin to discuss why are we not only with a bad ranking, but a ranking which is worsening every year. The ranking of Japan is going down, not up, compared to others. That's a very important issue that should be discussed. It's a matter of these debates, the press, the media, the scholars to discuss. After all, between the creation of GDP and the fact that GDP took the power in terms of as an index, there are 30 years. The GDP was beginning to be accounted in the 20s, and then became really important in the 50s, even 60s. Then I think it's going to be the same. It's a matter of advocacy and discussing it.
Yeah, I think in many ways, I think this GDP is yet another one of these kind of systems metrics that has to go away, right? I mean, and I think it will, right? That, as you note, it was created by Simon Kuznets, right? In the
20s,
in the late 20s, and he said when he created it, it was originally intended to be like a really rough indicator of whether, during the Great Depression, right, whether you're beginning to get economic activity going again, right? And he said, you should never use this as a way of measuring the success of the economy. At the time, that was his warning. But yet somehow it becomes adopted because it's one number, right? And And as we all know, it takes no account of the actual, what is the economic activity. So natural disasters are great for GDP, because it drives more economic activity. So it's another one of these kind of systems metrics that has to change, right? And I think that the kind of work that's coming from the leading edge companies where they can show a path of how you can measure success in a more multivariate way, there has to be many more dimensions to it than just that. And so now, as you say, there are many more emerging alternative ways of measuring the success of an economy, sustainable prosperity, and there how many would you say? Probably 6 or 8, kind of now emerging competing ways of looking at the success at a macroeconomic level that takes many more issues into account than just pure economic transactions.
Most important difference, there are many, but is the difference between stocks and flows. The market economy is mainly focusing on flows, while the altruistic society or the positive society is more focusing on stocks. Preserving the existing stocks of natural resources, culture, ethics, and also increasing the stocks. But today, the real danger is that the stocks is destroyed by the flows. Not only people are interested more than the flows than on the stocks, but they don't care if the creation of flows destroy the stocks. And the real move is trying to move from accounting flows to accounting of the evolution of stocks, of different kind of stocks, natural resources, education, health, which is part of the positive index. And that's a real change in profound behavior. Are we only what we produce, or are we also what we are, and what we have received, and that we will give to the next generation as a stock, as a global wealth, not only financial wealth?
I really like the way this conversation is going, and looking at this and thinking about how we define our success and how we define achieving our goals, and thinking about the different indices that are out there. There's GDP, but it also reminds me of the Human Development Index as well, something that looks at other pictures and does take some consideration of these stocks as you describe them. And I think about coming back to the Sustainable Development Goals, and looking at how within the SDGs there's some encouragement and requirement around reporting on progress of those goals that is not directly tied to national governments, but allows for other stakeholders to engage in demonstrating progress in this path forward. And I think it's good to bring it back to the SDGs. I know that, for example, cities are reporting on their steps as municipalities in implementing the SDGs on that very local level. Because I think we're going to need to see local action that also helps spur the global action, because nothing happens in a vacuum. And these two can feed off of one another.
It's really true. I think the SDGs as the interaction between the SDGs and companies is really interesting, and that kind of one of the things we've observed is that there are maybe 2 fundamental approaches that companies take. Well, maybe 3. First one is they ignore them altogether, but we won't consider them. The second one would be those companies that recognize the SDGs as important, but treat it as kind of a compliance act. They would say, the CEO would assign the sustainability person to figure out which of those 17 goals they can check the box on, right? Like, all right, just go tell us what we're doing now, which one, how many of these goals do we have some kind of impact on, and then they publish it in their sustainability report, which is not terribly helpful, right? I mean, that's sort of like neo-compliance. But there's a third type of company which looks at the SDGs, even though they are complicated and kind of hard to get a grip on, but they'll look at them not just at the 17 goal level, they'll look at all the sub-goals, and then they'll actually use the sub-goals and engage people in the company in an exercise to think about what are these, how could we as a company in the future have a positive impact on some of these. In other words, as a stimulant for thinking about future strategy. That's by far the most proactive way to use it and the most creative way to use it. There are more and more companies that are thinking of it that way.
To follow up on that, it has not yet been demonstrated very clearly what all of us here think, which is that to focus on long-term issues, to be positive, to be altruistic, to defend and improve the SDGs is good for the company, or good for the cities, or good for the nation. Let's take a company. A company cannot survive if it doesn't make profit. It is not yet clear, theoretically and in practice, that a company cannot survive if it's not positive. We think it is true. I think it is true. And I think that if a company is not positive, if it doesn't think of the interest of next generation, this company will die for many, many reasons. And that it is in the interest of a company to think about long-term, because long-term is in charge of even our next week future. But it's not yet clear. It's not obvious. It's not obvious that it is in my interest to take care of next generation. It is not even obvious for a parent to think that it is in his own interest to take care of the interest of his children. But it is obviously true. It is in our interest to take care of the interest of our children for many reasons. Then this, the fact that companies are going to be very fragile if they don't think of long term is still to be demonstrated and widely shared. I think it's true, but it has to be widely shared.
こういったさっき言った SDGs となんていうかネガティブチェックリストのようにですね、埋めていくのではなくて、新しいオポチュニティとして、どうやって捉え直していくかで、そういうポジティブなビジネス活動っていうのをどう増やしていくかって中で、あと、残り20分なのでもう少し、個人の話に少しフォーカスして、最後日本の話をして、終わっていきたいんですけれども、じゃあそういう変化の中にやっぱり今日の話って個人がものすごく結局企業も動かしてるし、投資活動も動かしてるしっていう話が出てきていると思っていて、じゃあ先ほど畑さんはそのストックの中で教育っていうものが大事だってお話をされてたんですけれども、ちょうどスチュアートさんがやっぱり新しい教育の話を先ほどもちょっとおっしゃってたので、こういった動きの中に教育っていうものがどう貢献してきて、でそれが個人にとってどう影響を及ぼしていくかっていうことのお考えぜひ聞けたら。
I can take a first push at that. I think it's critical, right? And I say that from a very self-interested perspective, being a long-time business school professor. But having lived most of my adult life in business schools that run top 20 MBA programs, I've developed kind of a clear perception of what the problems are with those and how they, in sort of a pernicious way, cause just continued inertial behavior on the part of existing companies as well as entrepreneurs. And I think it starts with some of the core assumptions that are drilled into MBA's brains. People that go through business education is sort of an indoctrination. And one of those, of course, is just the underlying assumption about, and we talked about a little bit earlier, of economic man, right? That somehow people are self-interested purely and are utility maximizers, and companies are profit maximizers, and if you look at the poor, the poor are survival machines, and they're concerned only with the most basic of needs. There are a whole set of assumptions, right, that become almost just they're assumed to be reality, and then you have a whole series of tools and methods and skills that are built on top of those assumptions. And that produces the kind of behavior out in companies that we see. So I think business schools actually carry a fair amount of responsibility for what we see now as business behavior, right? I absolutely do. And that's one of the reasons why I've personally been motivated to try to change that for a long time. And, the limited success I had at the mainstream schools, the Michigans and Cornells and UNCs and so forth, was to create a center, right, like a Center for Sustainable Business and, a couple of elective courses in the second year. But that doesn't really change anything, right? By then, they've already been through the first year core. That hasn't changed. That's the same thing. And you have some, cool things in the second year for the students that are so motivated. Take a couple of elective courses, maybe do a project, and then they graduate. So that's why this opportunity at the University of Vermont was, I thought, so consequential, because we had there a chance with a visionary new dean at a school and university that was not seen, didn't have strong reputation, wasn't a top 20 MBA program, but that's precisely why it's the place where we can do what we're doing, because a top 20 MBA program would not, scrap their existing MBA and start over again, which is exactly what we've done, right? So we were in a position to abolish the existing MBA program, start with a clean sheet of paper and develop a completely new program from scratch, where from start to finish, the program focuses on how do we create the inclusive and environmentally sustainable businesses of the future without a lot of the indoctrination, where I think, business students have to know the conventional wisdom, but we teach it from a critical perspective, not an indoctrination perspective. Because if they don't know those underlying assumptions and core tools, then they can't survive. But there's so much more built beyond that. Approach the way it's currently done from a critical perspective, and then add the tools, capabilities, skill sets, and so forth that are going to be crucial in sort of the purpose-driven, sustainable, and inclusive world of the future. So that's the program we've tried to create. It's called the Sustainable Innovation MBA. It's an accredited MBA program, so it is an MBA degree, but we'd like to think we've created a model for what future business education ought to look like, and we want to spread it.
It's a very good example of what should be done, very good example of what positive business education should be, but it should not be only in business schools. It should be also at the kindergarten level. At the kindergarten level, what is needed is to explain to demonstrate that altruism is good, that you can be happier if you help your neighbor to do his job, that you can learn a lot from the exchanges with the others, that competition is not the key, cooperation is fundamental, and that you should learn all around a different level of education. And it's a totally different paradigm. I very often quote Marx, not Karl Marx, Groucho Marx. I quote Karl Marx also because it's a great thinker. But Groucho Marx said once, "Why should I care of next generation? They have done nothing for me." Which is not true. Which is funny but not true, because it's easy to think about what next generation has done for me. For that, it's enough to think about what happened if there is not anymore a new generation. Suppose that as we speak, there is no one is born in nowhere, suppose. And then we understand easily that not only there will be no maternity, no kindergarten, etc., and later on there will be no one to replace us in the jobs and to pay for pensions, etc., etc. That will be a nightmare. Therefore, it's important for the beginning of education to explain that it is in our interest to take care of next generation. It is in our selfish interest. And then the whole of education should be about explaining what it means to be rationally altruistic. That could be done, that should be done at all levels of education. And then, if we do that, then we will understand why business cannot survive if they are not long-term thinking. Even if we look at what happened to the Dow Jones Index, I'm sure that we can demonstrate that the more the companies are long-term thinking, the more they survive. GE survived a long time because they thought a lot about long terms in terms of innovation, research. When they begin to focus only on short-term profit, the company was fragilized and today is almost dying because this long-lasting company, which is the only one which was at the creation of the Dow Jones Index 1 century ago, it's a very good example. They were long-term thinking. After that, they were not anymore. They disappeared. And I'm sure that there is a lot to say about it. And it's a matter of global change of thinking. In German, they say, a Weltanschauung, a vision of the world. We need to have a global vision of the world, explaining that altruism is in selfish interest. And that should be done at the core of very young people education.
Yes, yes, to all of this. It's that, and it's also that exposure from an early stage to I think the life benefits of being happy in a way, and also to look at what it means to really be able to give back into the community and to get how you get something by doing that. I was struck by the idea, and we talked about it a bit last night, the idea of public and private partnerships. And we've had, in my organization, we've had some interns from a business school. And it's unusual for a business school intern to come into an NGO that's primarily doing UN-related work. But we found a really useful connection there, and it was about exposure. It was about seeing what this is, and it gives them the idea, in looking for very specific and concrete things. I would love to see companies that are taking this sense of leadership to endow interns or endow seats at nonprofit organizations, to give into the community in that one little way, in order to get something. They also get something back. They get this broader perspective back. And the other thing that I would really hope as we build our education, we look at this education, is to really help people understand we don't have to live in a zero-sum world. That my success does not rely on someone else's failure. And that there is a way to find cooperative approaches, to find the win-win. Or, as we heard yesterday, a win for the buyer, a win for the seller, a win for the world, right? The win-win-win, even.
It's interesting because in this new MBA program, it's a 12-month program, and the practicum, is a 3-month. That's the capstone. So that's the last 3 months in venture, in company, focused on a sustainable innovation. So all the coursework is done in 9 months. And think about that for a minute. So we've designed it in such a way that it's so intensive, right, that it's impossible if you're a student in this program to make it in the program unless you collaborate with other people. You just simply can't do it otherwise, right? And that was done by design for exactly the reason you say, right? Whereas so many other academic programs and MBA programs are premised on the idea of a competitive model. This program, you couldn't possibly do the program unless and teamwork and collaboration is a big part of the learning as well. But literally, you couldn't make it through the program unless you figured out how to do that well, right? And I think that, again, is sort of practicing what you're going to actually do out in the world as you're learning it.
実際先ほど昨日の湯崎知事のウィンウィンウィン、三方よしっていう言い方をするんですけれども、それ以外にも日本には情けは人のためならず己のためなりっていう、ことわざがありまして、でこれは 結局人にした情けっていうのはそのぐるーっと回ってきて結局自分に返ってくるんだから、それは結局人のためにやってるんじゃなくて自分のためにやってるんだよっていう、そういう本当に長い目で見た長期的なその合理的な利他っていうことの表しだと思うんですけれども、じゃあそういったものがようやくこう情報が開かれた社会の中で、一旦人間が短期的な利己的な目的を追求しがちになっている中で、本当に長期的なそのパーパスドリブンな会社、NPO のアクティビティに力が持ち始め、国に力が持ち始めっていうふうになってる中で、じゃあ最後日本どうするかなんですけれども、先ほどおっしゃられたように、ランキングはちょっと下がり続けているというお話もあって、じゃあこれをその日本がどういう形でつなげていくかっていうところの、ぜひヒントをいただければ、でそれをディスカスして終われればと思うんですけども。
We hope to launch here in Japan a positive economy forum, and I cannot disclose yet, but we do hope to have a chance to do it, if possible, it's not sure, in Hiroshima. And that will be the main topic, what to do to have a more positive economy. I cannot say in a nutshell, but they are obvious problems. One is demography, the second are infrastructure, the third is public debt, the fourth is the position of women in the Japanese society. That is very easy to see in the criteria. I know that the Japanese have begun to change that and to improve, and as Japan is now also one of the number one country in the world in many dimensions, it could also become number one if they really begin to tackle those issues seriously. But it will take more than 2 minutes to discuss it, and this will be our will to develop that with a global program in Japan in the years to come.
To your point about, behaving with kindness, and there's a certain element of karma there, right? And so I just wanted to draw attention to an example of this in practice, which I think bodes well for, as a way of corporate behavior, and if it could become, I think it already is part of the Japanese national character, but the extent to which this could infect other countries, all the better. And the example I want to suggest is again with Unilever, right? So many people know that there was a hostile takeover attempt of Unilever, right? That it was Kraft Heinz that was trying to take over Unilever. And Unilever had a long history of building positive relationships with stakeholder groups, right? They had built a number of these blueprint platforms. They spearheaded the Marine Stewardship Council, right, for sustainable fisheries, and a variety of other things like that. And Paul Pullman, the CEO, had rejected the idea of doing quarterly reporting, and he took a lot of heat for that. And that was part of why that there was this attempt to take the company over, because some thought it was undervalued. Turns out Unilever's performed pretty well financially. I say this because it may be a little known fact of why Kraft Heinz ended up abandoning the attempt to take Unilever over was because the stakeholders that Unilever had worked with over the years, including a number of NGOs, rushed to their defense and went after these guys, and they paid a pretty high price for that, in terms of public relations, and they backed away. How many other corporations would a host of NGOs come to rush to their defense?
I'm going to take the prerogative of quoting a fellow panelist here, and in a recommendation to look at three things: to look at the footprint, the handprint, and the blueprint. What's happening with own operations, what's happening up and downstream, and where is the multi-stakeholder cooperation? I think what we've seen these last 2 days is an excellent example of setting forward a blueprint for what can come. And I hope also there's a good hard look at handprint and footprint.
そうですね、本当おっしゃる通り、この2日間で僕たちはその未来に対してのアングザイティだけじゃなくて、ブループリントを示し合わせて重ねてきて、でそれをどうやって自分ごと化するかっていうムーブメントを積み重ねてきて、でじゃあこれをどうやってポジティブなエコノミー、それを支えるポジティブなカンパニー、それを支えるポジティブなガバメント、それを支えるポジティブな僕たちっていうところにどうつないでいくかっていうのが、すごく大事な時間だったと思います。ぜひ最後に一言ナタリさんから何か言って締めさせていただければ、このセッション。
Well, I want to thank you for leading this session so well. Thank you for your way of organizing it. I want to thank the governor for his wonderful hospitality, and to tell you that it is just the beginning. The difficulty with the conference is that it has not to be a parenthesis in our life. It's good only if it's a beginning, and that when this conference is closed in 2 or 3 minutes, we're not going to say that we are back to normal business. I hope we are never back to normal business, and that we consider that this conference is a step forward and that help us change our behavior.
ではこれが第一歩だということで、じゃあこのセッションを締めさせていただきたいと思います。どうも皆さんありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。以上をもちましてセッション6を終了とさせていただきます。多くの素晴らしい意見をくださった登壇者の皆様に今一度大きな拍手をお送りください。どうもありがとうございました。